Good day! Welcome to LeeWorks, and today we're going to be building a quad. So at LeeWorks with me today, I've got Alex who'll be helping me behind the camera and also be helping with my terrible soldering skills.
I can't say they're terrible, they're not that bad.
So we're building a quad. What that means is one of these beautiful things. So this is my own 5-inch quad that I was actually flying earlier today. If you want to see some footage from this, you can have a look at my personal YouTube channel. So I'll put a link to that in our description. Today we're going to be building on what is called the Mamba stack. So this is the Diatone Mamba stack, the F405. This comes with a 40 amp ESC and the Mamba flight controller. So what all of that means is the ESC takes the signal from the flight controller and sends it to the motors, so it tells the motors how fast it needs to spin, and the flight controller takes the signal from the receiver, and the receiver also takes a signal from the transmitter. All of that together takes my stick inputs and sends it to a flight controller, and it's a nice big chain of things that makes it fly. As well as that, we're also going to be using the DYS Samok motors, which I got new because they're on like £8 a motor, I think it was. I can't remember what site it was.
About £8 a corner.
Yeah, £8 a corner. So my plan today is to build a nice freestyle quad, because I originally bought this mostly built. I wanted to experience kind of building something a bit more from scratch. So hence we're doing this video today. We're using the DYS Samok motors. The stator size on these is 2207, and the stator size just means these copper windings on the bottom of the motor, how big that centre point is for that, and these spin at a rate of 2600 kV. So that just means how fast the motor spins when you give it 1 volt. Also, we're going to be using the Foxeer Falkor mini FPV camera. Looking forward to trying that because on my current quad, I believe it's a Runcam Eagle.
Yeah, I think it is,
Yeah.
Micro Eagle.
Yeah, Runcam, either Mini Eagle, Micro Eagle, I'm not sure to be honest. I can look that up later. And this camera is going to be connecting to this Matek Mini VTX. So I've already got the Matek Mini on my current quad. I'm pretty impressed by it, so I thought I may as well use it again since I'm already familiar with it. So what this does is this takes the video signal from the camera, it connects to a flight controller, and the flight controller also adds its own elements onto the display when you're looking through these goggles. Within the goggles, you can see things such as your actual camera, also your battery voltage, how long you've been flying, your signal strength, plus anything else you want to add as well. Yeah, that is pretty much the build. We've got a few ancillary components, so of course for the props, I've been using the Ethix watermelon props by Mr. Steele. I quite enjoy using them, getting used to doing a lot of flying, so I'm very much a noob at it, but hopefully getting much better soon. And yeah, let's get into the build. We're going to be building all of this onto the frame, which is the iFlight XL5 version 2. I bought it second hand on one of the many Facebook pages that you can go to in the UK. Probably put a few links to them in the description as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice thing about this hobby is everyone is very welcoming, and they'll help you out with any questions that you've got, and they'll also try and sell you a lot of their old equipment as well.
Everyone's always trying to get rid of stuff. We've already got far too much.
Yeah, we've already got far too much. So yeah, we're going to be building all of this on the iFlight XL5 version 2, which is a 5-inch frame. I've disassembled the Mamba stack. I've got them in 2 different pieces, and I can use the existing standoffs that came with the frame. So first, I've got my ESC here, and for that, I'm going to put this on first. So I've got the I've got our power, our XT60 connector, and also a cable which goes to the flight controller. So I'm just working out which direction this needs to go in. So marked on the ESC is also the number for the motors. So usually your back left motor is motor number 1, or is it your back right is motor?
Back right is number 1.
Yeah, back right is number 1. So that would need to go in that way. So that brings our XT60 connector to there, and then we can put our flight controller on. So on the flight controller, we've got a nice little arrow which tells us the direction we need to mount that on as well. I've taken apart the Mamba stack, so I've started putting the ESC on it, and I've realised a few things with it. We need to make the most use of the space that we've got for the wiring, which means we need to rotate the ESC in a different direction. So that is going to mean we need to reassign the motors in software. But that's just the nature of this build, really, in a sense. It's going to be different depending on your frame, but the nice thing about this hobby is you have to improvise as you go along anyway. What I'm doing now is I've added a nylon standoff on top of the ESC, and I'm going to put the flight controller on top of that, and then I'm going to try and squeeze another standoff for that I can put my VTX on. It's going to be a tight fit, and I've not got a lot of thread to work with here, but hopefully it's going to be tight enough to hold it all together. If it isn't, we'll find out when I crash it.
Yeah. Just throw your VTX.
Yeah, just throw my VTX, throw it all.
That looks alright.
Yeah, I think that's going to be fine.
Great stuff.
Alright, so now I was just double checking if this was going to fit. It looks like it should, so I'm going to take that back off. I'm going to add those other nylon standoffs as well. You can get this as a pack. I'm guessing it's either Banggood or AliExpress, because I've stolen Alex's here. So let's try. Is that the same size?
It's the one next to it, the small one.
Yeah. So stick that on. Now we've got all of these standoffs on, I can mount the flight controller on top of it. So hopefully this cable is going to be just right, as Goldilocks said.
Should be able to fold that underneath, shouldn't you? Get that nice and tight under there.
So that's now folded underneath. And that should be nice and tight, and I've got the XT60 connector coming out to the side as well. So, one thing I'm not sure about the Mamba stack, Alex might know this, is why it doesn't come with a capacitor, because my Matek flight controller did come with a capacitor with that XT60 connector.
So it usually depends on whether you run in a 4S build or a 6S build. So some people just don't run a capacitor on a 4S build. Some people do. It usually just depends on whether the Mamba stack itself would need one. And from what I remember hearing, I think I read it somewhere, that it doesn't need one unless you're running 6S.
So has it got its own built-in filtering then?
I think it's got built-in filtering if you're running up to 4 or 5S.
So just for a bit of context, the reason we're talking about the capacitor here is usually when you hook up your video transmitter, your VTX, you'll start to see a bit of unusual banding through your video or some jello. That is usually down to either some vibration going in on your frame that isn't, or something's not quite tight enough, or it's a bit of power interference that you're getting. So usually your capacitor helps filter out any power interference, and it also makes debugging your build a bit easier because you've already ruled out the vibration. Being like a power issue, so then you can just focus on the vibration side of it.
So we actually had that issue with my quad today, didn't we, after that crash that I had. So I've got a smaller 4-inch racing quad, and after it came down in a crash, I noticed, I was getting all this video noise.
Yeah.
And when we went over to recover it, I just saw the capacitor hanging off. So it's one of them, we know why you can get issues like that, and it's a really easy thing to diagnose once you know what it is.
Yeah.
But it's just all that, like, you've got to know what you're looking for, really.
Yeah, it's again, the community is very helpful with that type of stuff. Plenty of experts in this.
And then there's so many videos and so many people looking and making content to help other people that it's just great.
So many great people.
So many great people. No one knows quads like I do.
No one knows quads like I do.
Just be careful with political.
So at the minute, I'm putting the standoffs, some extra nylon standoffs, on top of the flight controller so I can mount the VTX. I've just added some nylon standoffs onto it. What I'm about to check is that standoffs for the top frame are not going to be shorter than what I'm actually doing here. So the reason I've added these standoffs is so I can mount the VTX. I think I mentioned that before.
Yeah.
We've just had to change camera battery, so this is the first time that we've done a video like this.
Yeah,
so we really are making it up as we go along.
It's alright, we're making it work, man.
So yeah, just for a bit of context, you can see here that we've got our VTX on top, which is pretty much the same VTX that we're going to be using in this build. And we've also got my Matek F405 flight controller, and on the other side, we've also got a capacitor and the XT60 connector. So what we want to make sure of is that this height isn't bigger than these standoffs. So in the case of my build, that was the case where all of this was taller than these original standoffs here. So what we've done is we've been a bit hacky with it and just extended it slightly. But I've had a pretty stable flight, so I'm not too fussed about it. But luckily in this case, we're looking like that is going to be about right.
That looks about right to me. Looks pretty good.
Yeah. So I'm going to continue adding these standoffs now. It's tight. Tight. Was this the right key? I always pick up the wrong one. Alright, and I think we're in luck there. So with the Matek Mini, it comes with an adapter, and what this adapter does is it allows you to mount it on the same pitch as the standard build, but this also supports, I think that's usually the pitch for a toothpick build.
So yeah, that's like the smaller 20 by 20 pitch, and then I think it adapts to the 30 by 30 or the 30.5.
Yeah.
And then that allows you to put it on sort of a bigger quad, like a 5-inch or a 4-inch.
So in this case, we need to, yeah, looks like that's going to fit. I'm going to change how I do the standoffs for this. Alex had a nice idea, and go and explain that to me again.
So instead of using a standoff like we were going to use before, what we're probably going to end up doing is using a single bolt. So that's got a lot shorter height, which means we've got a bit more room to play with at the top of the stack.
Yeah.
And then also use a washer, so that'll just add that little bit more height that it might need. Maybe even use 2 washers if we need to. And then we've got that room at the top of the stack. It's going to be easier to solder onto to put those bolts onto the ESCs, because on the Mamba stack, the pads for the motors are very, very close to the standoffs.
Yeah, they are.
So in order to do that, we might put a washer down first, then put a bolt down, and it should just be enough room for the flight controller, and I think it'll be a good option doing that.
Alex did a nice job of braiding one of the motors as a bit of an example. So he's kind of thrown himself a bit because I wanted to do the rest of them now.
So now I'm the breeder.
Yeah, you can do my hair after this. Alright, so let's get some of those little washers.
So you probably want to get those motors that one motor you've got there soldered up first.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So the way you probably want to start doing that is, the easiest way of soldering a motor up like that is get it on the frame first. So put the 2 bolts that you'd need to. So there's those big machine screws with the cap head at the top.
I'm wondering, should I put any mud guards on this? I don't think I've got enough now. I've put them on my own build.
No, I don't think we have enough of them. So what you can actually get are what are called, I think Mr. Steele and the Ethix line, they're called pants.
Pants?
That's what he calls them, motor pants.
I like that.
So what they basically do is cover the bottom of the motor and stop mud getting into it if you do take a crash.
So I've already got that on my current build, so for that you can see I've got these little pants. These pants, yeah. And I was flying earlier today and you can see this one's a bit scuffed up now, it's got a bit of mud on it, but it's meant that no mud has got underneath my motor, because previously it got on mud under these motors and you can kind of feel it gritting a bit.
Yeah, you get that sort of gritty, non-smooth movement, and it's not good for the motor over like a long period, and also it adds more vibration than it needs to.
Yeah, so it's a nice additional safety feature, but that might be something I add in the future to this build, so I'll just end up buying a few more of them.
Some more pants.
Some more pants. We're going to keep repeating pants now throughout this.
Some more pants.
Pants.
More than motor pants.
Ooh, yes, he's just fallen off, but that's alright.
Didn't need that anyway.
Didn't need that anyway, yeah. So, I've watched a few build videos now, and I'm also lazy in that I'm just going to use 2 screws for the motors rather than just doing all 4. If I get any issues with vibration, then I'll probably go to all 4, but we'll see how we get on as a part of our first flight. Let's see how long this braid needs to be. So, let's compare. I think that's about right.
Perfect. Get those other ones done as well. Should I, boss?
Don't make me crack that whip. Yeah, so this is what we're looking at right now. So Alex is currently doing these braids, so it just looks prettier, really. You could just twist them.
I think my build's got them just twisted, but
yeah,
you're gonna have better wire experience than what's on my build.
Now we've got all the motors mounted onto the frame. If I just give them a quick spin, they'll feel pretty good. I did have to change another one before because it feels like it's got, maybe the bearing isn't so good on that one. It's like a slight knocking feel, but we can just have that as a backup motor. So luckily I bought 5 motors just in case I got a dodgy one, so it looks like that's paid off. So the interesting thing with these motors is they've got a slightly open bottom. So if I show you that on camera, so you can see you've got an open bottom and the windings are exposed. So I've also got some other Cobra motors that I'm planning to use on a different build, which don't have the same open bottom, where it's kind of all connected together. So I will, at some point in the future, look at getting some pants. I like that word, pants.
Pants.
Yeah, get some pants for this. But for now, we'll just keep continuing as we go. All the wires are braided, thanks to Alex. He's going to be doing my hair next, I think.
Is that during the video or after? Give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want, yeah. The only caveat to having braided wires is you can't tell which direction your motors are going to be spinning.
Because the wires are now just randomly one of 3 wires.
Yeah.
Rather than all coming out the motor as they would normally from the factory.
But that is a problem for future Adam. It just looks nicer. But what we can do is we can reverse the direction of the motor if we need to in the future. So what I need to do now is get our ESC mounted back in. I'm going to have to cut them to length a bit as well. See how far that needs to go. It's probably best to have it overshoot a bit, I think.
Always have a little bit of slack there.
Yeah, because what I'll do is, just say I have a crash and I snap one of the arms. What we don't want to happen is we don't want it tugging too hard on the stack. Once we've got all these soldered in, leave a bit of slack and cable tie it as well. It's going to be that cable tie taking all that tension rather than the actual flight stack.
So what we're doing now is actually tinning those wires. So what that basically means is getting a bit of solder on the end of the wire. And what that allows us to do is just have the correct amount of solder on the pad and on the wire, and it means we don't really have to add any more when we're putting the two together. Just makes it a lot easier to solder it, really.
They look pretty good. So, since this ESC has been used before, let's just double check those solder joints as well. So yeah, they're melting pretty nicely. We'll just add a tiny bit more.
Get some fresh flux on there as well.
Yeah, get some fresh flux.
So when you're doing a solder joint like this, you really want to get the soldering iron and the pad touching before you bring the wire in, and then you want that solder to be nice and wet, basically. And you want to get in and get out as quickly as possible, because you don't want to be heating up the ESCs or any other circuit board for too long, because you can cause damage. And you can also what's called lift a pad. So this little copper bit is called a pad, and you can actually remove that from the solder, from the actual circuit board if you apply too much heat. So that's something we've got to be a bit careful with here.
What I'll just do is I'll do a quick check just to see that those joints are alright on the solder. Ooh. They look fine. That is the motor soldered on to the ESC now. They all feel the same when you spin them, so that means I'm not shorting out to anything. One thing you can always check when you buy new motors. If you get a new motor, what you can do is you can take the ends of the wires, and you'll notice that when you touch those cables together and you try to spin the motor, you'll feel a bit of resistance. But as soon as you let go of those wires, that resistance disappears. So that shows that your actual coils aren't shorted out in any way. And we're essentially doing the same test once we've soldered it as well. So yeah, all feels good. So our next step now would be to get the flight controller mounted on. So that means now I've got that on, we're going to do what we mentioned earlier and put these washers on. Again, that's just to give us a bit more room to play with at the top of the stack. That allows to fit both the VTX and the receiver on there. So now we've got these motors soldered on, I think we can see if we get the beautiful BL heli beep. So just to show you what this sounds like, when I plug in my own quadcopter, it makes this noise. We're hoping to get the same sound out of this now. First we're going to use the smoke stopper. So what a smoke stopper does is it's got what's called a polyfuse built into it. And that polyfuse ensures that it's not going to draw over 1 amp. I think this is rated for. So you'll normally draw a high amperage if you've shorted something out or there's a fault electrically somewhere. So we'll see what happens. But it might also trigger when it beeps the motors for the boot up tune. So we'll see what that does now. Yep, that's a good sound. So the reason you didn't hear the second 2 beeps is those second 2 beeps just means the flight controller has started up as well. That means our ESCs, they've actually started up. So I'm just double checking which motors are moving when they do that. I'm not sure if this bottom one's moving. Yeah, the bottom one's moving as well. So yeah, that looks like all the motors are vibrating when they do that, which is perfect. The handy thing to remember when you're doing these builds is try to test every component as and when you fitted it. So if you do get problems along with your build, you can kind of drill it down to that component rather than throwing everything together, hoping for the best, and then turning it on and not knowing where to look. So what we can do again is, now we've hooked up the flight controller to the ESC, is test it again with a smoke tester, or smoke stopper, and see what happens. Yeah, that's the 2 beeps that we're expecting to get then. So you can also see we've got a bunch of lights on the flight controller too. So I am very happy with that.
Let's go fly it.
Let's go fly it, yeah. It's done, it's ready. Now we've got our receiver, and for this receiver we're going to work out whereabouts we're going to place this. I can see the pads that we need to solder this to. So you can see that it's been used in the past, so it's going to be this ground over here, 5 volt here, and RX1 that we're going to be using for this, and that's going to be these 3 cables that we're going to be soldering up to do that. So I've just got to re-tin the ends of these, because again I've got this second hand and I'm hoping it's got the correct firmware on it, but we'll find out soon. That is also on. So let's make sure that power's up and nothing's shorting. So get my battery, my smoke stopper, and hope no smoke comes out. Our receiver is lighting up, which is a wonderful sign. It's flashing red. If I press the button, flashes green, which is good. Right. what I can either do now is try and bind this to my transmitter and plug a laptop into it, or get started on the VTX. I think we're going to do the transmitter. Yeah, do the transmitter, and then we can see from there how I need to remap the motors. I've loaded up Betaflight, as you can see, and when I plug it in, it should hopefully show up as COM4, which it does. Let's connect. So what we can see first is in the bottom corner it's currently running Betaflight 4.1.1. Our target is FPV F4 OSD, and I don't like the gyros working. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably reflash this anyway to a slightly later version of Betaflight. So I think we're on 4.1.3 now, aren't we? Yeah, so that's a bit unusual as well. Data flash 3, 0 bytes. So what we can also do is we can also see if the motors spin up. So to do that, we'll use the smoke stopper again with it plugged in. So now as you can see on my screen, I'm going to take I understand the risks, because you don't want to arm your motors with your props on when you're just testing it on your table, because that's how you end up all cut up. So first off, we're doing motor 1, that seems to be spinning nicely. And I've got to remember this is going through the smoke stopper, so if I just do this too quickly, it will stop working. So that's motor 1, motor 2. Just be a bit of vibration in that one. Motor 3. Motor 4. That seems happy as well. And just to give you an example of what a smoke stopper does, I'll put all 4 on and we'll see when it stops. Yep, so that is the smoke stopper doing its job there. So as you can see on my display up here, you can see the incoming voltage. So the voltage ends up going down when I do that. So what we can do next is test it without the smoke stopper. The scary bit now. So hopefully if we've done everything correct, all the motors should spin up without any issues. So we're back in again. And that is looking good. I am very happy with that. So let's unplug that. So we've not seen any smoke, which is a good sign. And now we can put this in bootloader mode. So what that allows us to do is that allows us to flash some updated firmware. So that is it just bootloader? BL, that's it. I always forget what the command is. So now you can see on the screen it says DFU, so we are now in bootloader mode. So we click on update firmware. So now I want to select the correct firmware from the drop down. We'll just go to the iFlight dump, and what we'll see, you can see that it says FPV F4 OSD. 2 different versions here. So we've got the legacy version, Diatone version from the look of it. So I'm not sure what version that needs to be. The nice thing about these flight controllers, even if you do put the wrong firmware onto it, they've got a bootloader button, and that will always allow you to go back into DFU mode. So holding that and powering it on while plugging it in will let go back into DFU mode even if you completely mess up your configuration. So we've got 4.14 available now, and that was released just after Valentine's Day. So what we'll do is we'll load that firmware. downloaded it from the internet now. That looks fine. Let's just double check everything else. So we're going to do a full chip erase, so that'll wipe all the configuration data. We're going to make sure no reboot sequence is ticked as well, because we're already in boot mode. So now what we can do is flash that firmware. Programming successful. Very happy about that. So just turn it off and on again now. Usual IT mantra. So let's connect. What do you reckon? Shall we apply custom defaults? Yeah. Right, custom defaults applied. Let's connect. Right, we've actually got a working gyro and an accelerometer now. Bit slow to respond, but that might be because it's not got enough power at the minute. Alright, so we've now got power on our receiver. We'll turn on my transmitter.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Telemetry on. So I need to work out what the buying procedure is for the XR4. So I'm hoping I can just press this and see what happens. So I think that's bound because it's got a constant green light and the red light's flashing. I think that's correct, but we'll see shortly. So we'll just stop that from trying to bind, disconnect it, reconnect. Alright, the green light is on the receiver.
Telemetry lost. Telemetry recovered.
Oh, we now have telemetry, which is a good sign. What I'm not seeing at the minute is anything from my receiver, but that'll probably be because I've not actually mapped it in my configuration. So yeah, let's configure ports first. So we soldered to RX1. I believe it's the same as UART1, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so save and reboot. Let's connect. Yep, so we're getting different values now. And throttle does stuff. That's a really good sign. Yaw does stuff, that's already mapped. Pitch works, roll works. Auxiliary 1 works. Fox4 is already mapped. Yeah, looks like we're in business. The next thing I'd need to do is look at my modes and how I'm going to set those up. I normally set up pre-arm and arm, and what that means is I need to do 2 switches in order to arm the quadcopter. So usually I have this mapped to that switch and that switch to arm it. And I also have a few other functions on that, so just in this middle part I normally have my beeper as well, so that makes the motors beep. Should I end up crashing it somewhere and I'm trying to find it. Right, so the quad's arming, which is a good sign. Though the beeper isn't working, so I'll probably just need to enable my beeper in the config. But that is a really good sign. That's a good sign. Awesome. I'm pretty happy with how most of that is working, so the next step is to look at putting the VTX on top of this stack. To do that, I need to first solder it onto this adapter, which isn't too hard, and I also need to work out which cables I'm going to do for it. So I probably want to enable PINIO, and what PINIO does is I can map either powering the VTX on or off on one of my switches. Because the problem with this VTX, it doesn't really have a pit mode, so it sees pit mode as 25 milliwatts. That means it's output power, and that's still enough to affect anyone around you. But what you can do with PINIO is you can tell the VTX to turn itself off until you actually turn it on through a switch. I'm ready to solder the adapter to the VTX. I've just put some nylon screws underneath because that's how the adapter works for it. And I'm essentially just going to solder this actual VTX board onto the adapter board. So now's going to be a good test of my soldering skills. So if you can see that, you can see those two have actually bridged there now, which is exactly what we wanted. So let's do the others. So now I've finished connecting the pins that I need to the adapter. So in this case I'm going to be doing PINIO, the TLN, which is tramp, so that's like what's referred to as smart audio on other flight controllers. They're just two different standards. And I've also done some of the voltage pins as well. So really we're not going to be using any pins on this side, but it's just good to keep the adapter just hooked up to the rest of the VTX. We're going to start soldering the wires onto the VTX, the video transmitter. I'm going to do 2 wires, and that is going to be for tramp or smart audio, is whatever you want to call it, and also PINIO, and they're going to go towards the back of my flight controller. And then I'm going to use 3 other wires to do video and power, and those are going to go to the front of the, well, to the side of the flight controller, to the right side of it. So we've got this side soldered in, and that is going to be video and power, so that's at the top, and then over on this side PINIO and IRC tramp. But that is looking alright so far. So now we can decide from here, because we've got some pretty long wires, how we're going to route those wires now to the top of the VTX. So I'm not sure if I explained earlier what tramp and smart audio do, but it just allows you to control the VTX on what channel it goes to. I noticed after checking the manual for the VTX, it takes voltage straight from the battery. What I've had to do instead, move the power pin to just underneath the board connector that goes to the ESC. The next step as a part of this build is to get the camera mounted up and work out how long these wires need to be. Alex has already put the adapter onto it and has let me steal his mounting bracket because this frame didn't come with one when I bought it second hand. Annoyingly, the screws don't fit into this. We did try and Dremel it out, but this metal's a bit too hard for the bits that we've got. It also got very hot as well. So instead, we've just resorted to zip tying it on for now. So in this case, we've just done 1 around the middle, and we've also done 2 into the screw holes as well. And luckily, there's not a lot of give in that. We've got the camera mounted, and it's starting to look a lot more like a quad. So next thing we need to do is, I need to tidy up after myself a bit, so I've got a bit more room to work. But now we need to actually solder those wires from the camera onto the flight controller as well. So I've not done that back as much because I know for a fact that the soldering iron is only going to end up melting some of it anyway. But this is not a soldering tutorial.
Stay tuned next week for the soldering tutorial.
Oh god, no. I am no expert, I'm far from it.
I'll do a soldering tutorial.
Actually, yeah, you can do a soldering tutorial. We can have Steve, one of our other founders, do a
glue tutorial.
A glue tutorial. Steve loves his super glue.
You could do another video on glue if you like.
Well, if you want to see what we mean, look at one of our previous videos for that. Because he did a PC case build where he worked with Kevin to do some of it. So Kevin is one of our tenants here. He runs Laser 3D and does some really beautiful PC cases. In the video, I think he did offer to make a video about glue.
He offered to make a video about glue.
Yeah.
So if you want a video about glue, Steve's your man.
Yeah, leave a comment below. You can kind of see here that the VTX is flashing. It shouldn't be doing that, but when I look in my goggles, I can actually see a video feed, so you can see how it's flashing on and off. So I reckon that has got something to do with PINIO not being configured yet.
So your VTX currently isn't powered up.
That's a good sign. So now what we can do is we can add that. Save it. And now our VTX is powered up. So that means I've now got PINIO on my VTX. And it's stable too. That makes me very happy. So the next thing we need to do is configure tramp as well. I think that's already been done. So now what we can do is double check that on my goggles. So let's switch to R1 and we have got signal. So at the minute you can see Alex in the shot along with my laptop where I'm configuring Betaflight, and you can also see we've actually got some OSD elements from the camera to turn that off and the joystick that comes with it.
What are the OSD elements you can see?
So here you go.
Oh yeah.
So you can see we've got this little connector here. So you can see I've got a nice little menu as well. Yeah, there's Alex helpfully pointing to everything. So that is, let's get the orientation of the joystick correct. So there we go, that's up, that's down. So a few things we can set here. So what I'm going to do first is keep everything as defaults for now. And we want to be able to set the OSD. So I'm guessing, is that special setting? Alright, let's just, I'm guessing it's these. Not sure what image style means. Oh, there we go. So image style. So since we live in the UK, I'm going to set this to cloudy. So save and exit. So now I've not got any OSD elements, which is good. So what I'm just going to do a quick test, is the Betaflight command to show Betaflight's OSD. So at the minute I'm not getting anything for that. Oh no, I've got OSD now.
Alright, cool.
It's battery less than full. Cool.
Great. So yeah, it was just a reboot issue.
Let's see if I can get the Betaflight OSD on again. Yeah, that's working. So now I can change my profile, go to features, change my VTX channel. That is all looking very good. I'm going to work out which direction the motors are spinning. So 1 is currently motor 3, 2 is currently 4.
3 is currently 1.
Yep.
And 4 is currently 2.
And copy that. Paste it. And save it. And hopefully those mappings are going to be correct. Motor 1 should be this motor here, which it is.
And we should probably make a note now, just to make, just as you're spinning up each individual motor, note down which one is spinning the right way and which one is spinning the wrong way.
That's a good point actually.
So it looks like motor 1 is actually spinning the wrong way. So the best way of checking that is get a loose piece of wire or something and then rest it on the top of the bell.
Or you can be a bit more risky, like I'm doing, and actually touching the motor and feeling the direction that it's going in.
That also works.
By default, a lot of quads have motors spinning into the centre, but that's only from the perspective of the back and from the perspective of the front. So in this example, this motor is going to spin inwards to the centre like that. So think about it as kind of orbit, like your fingers orbiting around the motor, and it's going towards the centre. And in the case of the other one here, we want to do the same. So it's going to orbit around and go to the centre like that. We also want to do the same with the front, so that's going to orbit around and come to the centre. The same with this as well. You could also set it up as well to they all spin away from the centre. Some people prefer that, and I'm not 100% sure of the benefits of that. I probably need to do a bit more research on that. After seeing how we're going to mount the top plate, we've noticed a few problems that we've just sorted out off camera. And that was the standoffs. The top plate were actually, the camera was in the way of it. So instead what we've done now is we've repositioned the camera a bit further back. Alright, let's see how that is going to go together. That is going to be perfect. So this is the antenna that we're going to be using for the VTX, rather than this one. Once I can get that out. There we go. So that is going to come out the back like that. So I need to decide where I'm going to mount the receiver because of that. But this is a bit of a bodge job, this. But at least the bind button is very accessible.
It's important,
That is very important.
that. And the LEDs are visible.
This is a pretty nice frame, this, to be fair. 'Cause there's plenty of holes for zip ties. So I'm thinking of doing the zip tie thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by the zip tie thing is you can use a zip tie and you can have the antenna wire following along that zip tie, and you just put a bit of heat shrink around it, and that just means that this is never going to get in the way of the propellers. So now I'm tightening the camera up after zip tying all the motor wires down, and that is pretty much looking like a quad. So what we've done is added a cable tie up here, and we've heat shrunk the antenna to the cable tie. We've also ran the other part of the antenna down the side of the quad, and we've got it coming out the front here. That will allow the receiver to receive signals in both orientations as such. And now we've got all of that down, should be able to test it, make sure that everything works. Let's turn my transmitter on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Let's plug battery in. Can kind of work out how we're going to mount the battery as well now. That's what we like to hear. We should be able to activate the beeper. So now that's pre-armed. Cool. So make sure the VTX turns on, which it does. And let's also check the goggles to make sure everything looks fine there too. Yep, we can see a total arm time and everything. It's good to do changing our OSD elements. So at the minute we've not got any OSD elements. But the camera doesn't look too bad. Awesome. When you're putting props on, thing to note is you want the rising side of the propeller to go in the direction that your motor is spinning. So in this case, the rising side of the propeller being the side that is tilting upwards, so the actual top of it, this curve here. So on some propellers, it does actually say which direction it rotates in, but in the case of these, I don't think it says it. So what we know is we know that these two front motors here are spinning inwards. So in this case, this prop is going to go on like that. So it's spinning inwards like so. It's the same with this one as well, so the rising side is on that, which is going to be spinning inwards. So you essentially want to have it in the direction that is going to give you lift. So if you think about it, it's like a fan. It's going to be pushing air downwards by pushing it underneath the propeller. The reason I like these propellers is because they're made out of polycarbonate. So some propellers are very brittle, so that means as soon as you crash or hit something, they'll end up just exploding apart. In most cases with these, they'll just end up bending. So here comes the risky bit now. Make sure our radio's plugged in.
Welcome to OpenTX. Switch warning.
So, I want to be very careful with this now. You should probably not do this, but I really want to see if it's going to work. So, see all the propellers moving.
Lost. Telemetry recovered.
We are in luck.
Do not take off.
Awesome. So that is looking like a very pretty quad. So what we'll do... So you've just watched me put together my quad, and I am looking forward to getting it outside and flying it. So as you can see, I think I did alright with my first proper build, doing it from scratch. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you've got any suggestions for what I should do next, or anything that I've probably missed, just leave a comment, let us know what you think, and tell us what other type of content you'd like to see, especially if you want to see a video from Steve about glue. But yeah, I'll probably upload some flight footage as well from this quad in the next few days after this upload, but we'll see how we get on. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Hit the bell if you want any notifications from us, or don't. It's up to you. Thanks for watching.